So nearly 27 years ago, one April afternoon, my wife Valerie went into labor with our third child. It was a long and painful labor. I say painful because I watched her face for a number of hours. I would go over to the bed where she was laboring on and attempted to help her breathe. After about the third or fourth try, Valerie said, "Get away from me. You're bothering me." I did a foot stomp and said, "I'm a Lamaze graduate." She shushed me. A couple hours later, Mary Blair was born. The doctor raised up that child, said, "Dr. Daniels, you have a beautiful red-headed daughter." Now, those of you who've been there know that not only were we grateful that she was born after all those hours and that she was healthy, but in an instant, we fell in love with her, right? I see all the nods. She didn't do anything to cause the love. In fact, she caused a lot of pain to Valerie. She didn't ask to be born into this world. She didn't ask to be born into our family. She didn't order it up that she would be born in New Bern, North Carolina. She had absolutely nothing to do with our loving her. It was instantaneous. An absolute, unconditional love. I think that's what Jesus is trying to say to Nicodemus in our famous gospel text from John chapter 3. Here they come. I'll pause. Hold on. We're all right. We got the right people here. I've had parishioners who've refused to go with the medics before, so we'll see what happens. Blessings to you. They can do a lot more for you than a sermon can right now. Okay, congregation, you back with me? She's in good shape. She's with the right people. Yeah, she is. I think that's what Jesus was trying to say to Nicodemus. What I don't think he was saying about being born again, or as the NRSV says, born from above, is that somehow you and I can live our days over again. Nicodemus was inquiring about that, by the way. And you and I also inquire about that. In fact, we sometimes want that to be the case about being born again or born from above. Couldn't I please live some of those chapters over again? You know, there's a radical move in the game Scrabble. Anybody know Scrabble? You know, you get your little chips and you put them on your tent. And you're looking at them, and you discover that none of your little pieces are going to work. And there's a radical move in Scrabble where you can dump them all back into the box and pick brand new ones. It's so often that you and I want to play that out with our life. We'd love to just dump the pieces that are not working and get all new ones. And yet Jesus seems to be saying to Nicodemus and to us, sorry, that's not the way it works. You don't get to live any of your days over again. What is Jesus saying about being born again or born from above? I believe it's akin to last Sunday's Old Testament text when God was speaking with Abraham about leaving Haran and moving to the new land, Canaan. When God said to Abraham, "Come with me to a land I want to show you." I think it's more akin to what Jesus is trying to say to Nicodemus. Come with me to a land I want to show you, called the kingdom of God. Now, within that come and see this new land I want to show you, I think there are several features about a new life. One is that you and I would be given a new motive for our living. You know, we come into the world, Mary Blair came into the world that April afternoon. We come into the world totally self-centered. We don't want to say that about our children and our grandchildren, but it's all about them. It's all about us. Our whole natural being is to rate everything around us. And yet, what Jesus is saying to Nicodemus is, if you want to discover a new life being born from above, you'll have to allow God to come into the middle of your natural order of things, and that you revolve your life around God's bounty and grace. Because when you are working it out of the center, it doesn't work. It's like looking at your Scrabble pieces and saying, wow, I want to do a big dump in the box. You and I know that life works better for us when we're God-centered, when we have a new motive for our life's purpose. Secondly, I believe that Jesus is saying to Nicodemus, part of receiving new life, of being born from above, is to receive a new perspective, to see people and God's world differently. The Apostle Paul said, "From now on, we will no longer see people from a human point of view." What was that human point of view? The previous point of view or perspective is to see people in categories. We use words like those people. We use it a lot, don't we? Those people overseas, those people in China who must have started this coronavirus, those people who live over on the other side of the city, those people who are down the street who I don't like, those people who look different from me, who believe different from me, and those who vote different from me. That's the old human perspective that the Apostle Paul's talking about. From now on, Paul says, you will no longer see people that way. You'll now see people the way that Jesus sees them. What would people look like if we began to put on some lenses that are Christ-like? How would we all look to each other? We would look like siblings. We would look like blood brothers and sisters. We would look like children of God. We would no longer be categorized in some flimsy kind of surfacey way about those people. We would have a new perspective, you see. We would have a new vision, a new view on each other. And thirdly, not only a new motive and a new perspective, but a new action. When you and I receive new life or being born from above, we're enabled and called into action that we otherwise would not find ourselves. Do you find that's true? As a Christian person, when you're in your best self, you find yourself in situations where you say, how in the world did I get here? What does God think that I'm going to offer? in this situation, or this looks really difficult. We're called into places of service that we, quite frankly, would not find ourselves if we had not received the gift of new life or being born from above. Many years ago, when I was doing youth ministry, I met and got to know a beautiful Latina named Maria Acosta. When we were both 19, we were called upon to go and serve at a youth camp, a junior high camp. Now, let me parenthetically say that the Roman Catholics are correct. There is a purgatory, and it's a place between heaven and hell where people go to suffer for their sins, and it's called a junior high camp. Now, if you're an 8th grader, I'm going to try not to pick on you. 8th graders alone can be beautiful, wonderful children of God. When they're together, however, some evil spirit roams around them. And at this camp, Maria Acosta, God bless her, was given the worst cabin. Worst meaning the girls in her cabin, all 8th graders, were from an inner city area of Miami, where they were hard driven to be mean. It was a survival technique for them, of course. And there was one girl in the cabin named Tina, who was their sport. Tina was roughed up from the very beginning, left out, pushed aside in every way that an 8th grade group could do in a cabin. Maria Acosta, this beautiful, loving person, was their cabin counselor for a week. I asked her several days into the camp, "How's it going, Maria?" She said, "Well, the first morning I woke up early, and I found Tina sitting beside her bed. I quietly went over and inquired, and I noticed that she had wet her bed." An 8th grader. She was so traumatized, you see, by this experience. She wet her bed. Maria Acosta then quietly snatched those sheets off the bed. When the girls went off to go to breakfast, Maria Acosta then quietly went to the laundry, put those sheets in the washing machine. Later on in the afternoon, dried those sheets. When no one was in the cabin, then carefully put those sheets back on the bed. The next morning, it happened again. Tina wet her bed. Maria Acosta again, when no one's looking, snatched those sheets off, lovingly took them to the laundry, washed them, dried them, put them back on her bed. The third morning, it happened again. Maria did the same thing: snatch, wash, dry, lovingly put them back on the bed. She said, but the fourth morning, we all got up, and Tina had not wet her bed. She said what had happened is that God's love had taken over that cabin, that through the course of the camp and the week, those girls began to receive an element of grace. They began to bring Tina into their stead. Tina was no longer outcast, no longer pushed aside, no longer ridiculed. She was now part of the group. Let me ask you, who washed your sheets? Who washed your sheets when life was sideways, or when you had a significant setback, or when you were pushed aside, or ridiculed or left behind, who came along and in loving grace snatched your sheets, lovingly and quietly washed them, dried them, put them back on your bed so that you would have some element of respect and love. And let me ask you, for whom are you washing sheets these days? "27 years ago, that doctor raised that child up. You have a beautiful redheaded daughter. We fell in love immediately, without condition." I think that's what Jesus is saying to Nicodemus. He seemed to be saying to Nicodemus and to us, do you know how that love affects us? It causes us to have new life, to be born from above. And in receiving that gift, you and I are given then a new motive that we want to live out God-centeredness. We're given a new perspective. We begin to put on lenses that have to do with the way Jesus sees the world. And it changes everything. And we're given a new action. We're placed in situations where, guess what, folks? We have the outstanding privilege of washing sheets. Amen.